Hello and welcome to the RTE Soccer World Cup podcast, daily edition. Sticking with my tradition of changing the name of it every time I say it. Anyway, we have the World Cup final that the hosts wanted. It's Messi versus Mbappe. Sorry, it's Argentina versus France. It is one I think that most neutrals will be quite happy about, as much as we all loved the Cinderella story of Morocco. It was pretty well sent home in a pumpkin tonight by a very, very, very professional performance from the holders. I'm joined by Paul Corry and by Peter Branigan to look back on it. Um, Paul, it was it was a very good start for the French, obviously getting a goal within 5 minutes after some very un-Moroccan defending, and after that the Moroccan team, everybody had been kind of talking about, oh, they're getting by on 27% possession, lower than everybody bar Costa Rica. The French, either by accident or design, kind of let Morocco have the ball and then rode their luck a little bit, picked them off. It wasn't a complete performance, but at the same time, the way they took their chances and the way they defended would have the Argentinians been looking on kind of ominously, I'd say.
Yeah, it was far from fluid, Mikey, with regards to kind of their attacking play and how they were in possession. But I think we've seen that a couple of times now from France. You would have seen in the England game as well, where they're more than happy to maybe just concede possession and let the opposition have it and just sit back into their shape. And yeah, they started the game well and took advantage of that good start with the well-worked goal. It was a mistake from a Moroccan point of view, a rare mistake that we haven't seen in previous rounds. But to be fair to France, they took advantage while they were on top. But I mean, from there on in, it was a completely different Moroccan side than we saw the one against Portugal and Spain. I mean, they had more passes in the first half against France they did in the whole of 90 minutes against Portugal. So that would give you kind of a bearing of how the game played out. But for all their good play and for all their possession, they got themselves into some really good positions, but they just didn't have that killer instinct, didn't have the quality like Ziyech and Hakimi down the right-hand side, getting great joy down there, but the final ball and the product just wasn't quite there. And then when it was there, they didn't have the bodies in the box nor just that kind of potent striker to put them away. And when you don't put them away, you always run the risk that France will pick you off in the counter-attack. The decision, I think, to bring Thuram on and move Mbappe central was a wise one, because Hernandez was having a difficult time there, and a little bit of magic from Mbappe, just the drop of the shoulder. There was two instances. There was one where he rolled Hakimi around the corner and he gave it to Thuram. Thuram reversed it back to him, little drop of the shoulder, went around Amrabat. And for me, I mean, you deserve a bit of good luck when kind of just that sprinkle of magic, and the second goal really killed it off. But it was far from fluid. It wasn't a silky French performance. So, I mean, going into the final, I mean, I'm sure the Argentinians will be fancying themselves.
Peter, it's the early goal kind of changed the dynamic. It was obviously the first goal an opposition team had scored against Morocco at the World Cup, and it kind of changed how they had to play. They lost their three starting defenders by kind of 5-10 minutes into the second half as well. But kind of reminded me of one of those awful kind of 1990s high school movies where, you know, the nerdy girl takes off her glasses and takes out the bobbin holding her hair up, and suddenly everybody realizes she's actually really beautiful. So Morocco showed that, you know, they're well able to play football, and they did it in quite like they played some lovely stuff there. But as Paul said, it was the lack of a cutting edge that cost them.
Yeah, well saved there, Mikey. I wasn't sure where that was going for a second, but look, the lad said it before the match started. If France could get an early goal, and we even said it the last time, I think it was before the Portugal game, when I was on the podcast last time with Paul, that like if you can get a goal early against Morocco, it just changes the way they have to play. And then there was a couple of chances. I know they hit the post in the first half, but there was a few opportunities where you were just screaming at the television for them to hit it, go for it, just see what happens. And they were like trying to walk the ball into the back of the net or trying to pick the exact right time to hit the shot. And, you know, it's a World Cup semi-final. At that stage, they were only one down. So it was incredibly frustrating that they wouldn't just pull the trigger and see what happens. But yeah, look, I agree with Paul. Even it wasn't a vintage performance from France, but I still felt they were fairly comfortable throughout. There was one or two little worrisome moments for them, but for the most part, I think France will say they can improve, but they didn't expend all of the energy that they had to tonight, and I think that'll be the way they want to go into the final on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I've got a rest as well, so I'm able to watch, you know, my DVDs of She's All That and 10 Things I Hate About You now up until, you know, the third, fourth playoff. What Peter said there is very true, and it was very noticeable. Paul, kind of the 75th minute, the substitute striker from Morocco, Hamdallah, made a great run. And maybe, I don't know much about him, maybe his left foot is for standing on, but he seemed very reluctant to take a shot. He was trying to get back on his right. And then 4 minutes later, Mbappe, played that 1-2 with Thuram, made a lovely run into the box. And he took a shot that was never going in, but it took a deflection off a Moroccan player. And next thing, it's in the path of Kolo Muani, and it's a goal. It just shows that even the best player in the world, sometimes you just need to swing a foot at it and see what happens.
Yeah, and it's fine margins, isn't it? And Morocco probably needed a bit of luck at one point or another to get themselves back in the game, because at times they were finding it difficult to really deliver that kind of sucker punch in the final third. But absolutely, there's probably one or two opportunities even in the first half, little balls that went into the box. If you even think of the bicycle kick, something out of nothing, it was a good save from Lloris. Even if that had gone in, or that chance that you mentioned where he's dribbled through, just let swing or let fly it, and who knows what could have happened. And it was just those fine margins and those little strokes of luck that didn't seem to fall their way tonight. I actually thought in general they played very, very well. I thought they caused the French problems that probably I wouldn't have foreseen happening when they went 1-0 down, but just wasn't meant to be for them. And you could probably say the same about Croatia last night. Like, for all their good play and for all their possession, like they didn't take advantage of those moments. And I think when you look at Argentina and you look at France and the top teams, when those opportunities present themselves, they're just so lethal in that final third. And once they get ahead, you saw how the French kind of dropped deep and reverted into a nice consolidated shape. Argentina did something similar yesterday and hit them on the counter attack, and you just can't afford to go behind against those sides. And when you do, you have to be really clinical, and it just wasn't meant to be for Morocco.
Yeah, on the first goal, Paul, just get your opinion on it. The obviously El Yamic kind of charges out. He tries to intercept the ball before it gets to Griezmann, and people are saying maybe he was hyped up. Start of the game, he wants to kind of just make a statement, or maybe he thought that was the best way to stop Griezmann, but it was obviously the wrong choice at the wrong time. Was there any chance that the unfamiliar system might have been thrown to Moroccan defenders? I think it was the first time they played three at the back, and they did well. Obviously they conceded a goal for the first time in the tournament. They seemed a little all at sea. Did you see anything there that maybe suggested that they weren't quite familiar with the shape or the system?
I thought the first 10 minutes in particular, they looked quite edgy, and maybe that was just the occasion. I even thought Amrabat, who's been so good throughout the competition, tonight was probably a bit of an off night. And the first 10 minutes, I thought he gave the ball away at times. Saiss obviously was carrying the knock, but even himself, they just looked a little ropey. And of course, when you play that three, there is a tendency that your centre halves are going to get pulled into positions where they don't necessarily want to go, and that's into those pockets of space that Griezmann was in. And as a defender, Mikey, the one thing that you cannot do is you can't gamble. Like, particularly against a player like Griezmann, against a French squad, you can't gamble, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And if you don't make it, you've got serious quality, I guess, with a clear route to your 18-yard box and towards your goal. So absolutely, El Yamic should have stayed up. He should have just held his position, let Griezmann receive the ball. Worst case scenario, he gets a turn and he's running at you. But what you can't do in that situation is just go all for leather and hope that you get the ball. On this occasion, he missed it. And when France got into that position, Griezmann, who's been absolutely incredible all competition, his decision-making was good. Even for the first goal, there was a bit of luck. There was one or two ricochets that fell to Hernandez, and it was a well-taken goal. But it is one that Morocco will look back on, I'm sure, and say it was preventable.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You ride your luck in the tournament, Peter, and Morocco are obviously so reliant on their defence. And, the West Ham defender, Aguerd, pulled up in the warm-up. Captain Saiss went off after 20 minutes, and Mazraoui was off within 5 minutes. That's three of their starting back four, you could say. There's only Hakimi left from, say, probably what's their first choice back four. That's tough when you're coming up against the World Cup holders.
Yeah, 100%. Like, everything kind of needed to go their way, and that was what the lads were saying in the build up to the game. And losing one player is tough. Losing three is massive. So yeah, I think they were it was like we said the last day, they were depending on kind of holding France for as long as they could, potentially frustrating them, trying to put doubts in their minds, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I know I said it a moment ago, but I thought once France scored, I know Morocco had decent possession, much better possession than they had in their previous games. but there wasn't really a point when I thought, oh, they're about to score here. It was yeah, it was like reasonably comfortable, and I think Argentina will offer a lot more in the final going forward than Morocco did. But then I'm not, there's maybe more question marks about Argentina's defense, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But yeah, like incredibly unlucky. But as you said, you need to ride your luck a little bit going through one of these tournaments. So it was kind of bound to catch up with them. You have to show that bit of ambition to go forward and get the goals. And yeah, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, there was just too many occasions when I thought, pull the trigger, take the goal, have the shot, see what happens. And that was the element that frustrated me watching them this evening.
Yeah, and that's one thing you would say, Paul, about France is they're quite efficient in front of goal. If you don't score with every shot, but they'll take a shot. Like Giroud, 100% should have scored in the first half after the ball kind of came back to him after Mbappe's attempt, and he snatched at it a little bit. It was very French. It was almost kind of a little bit kind of relaxed with how he swung at it. It went just wide. He obviously absolutely nearly broke the post with a shot earlier on. Like France work the ball into a shooting area and they shoot. It sounds simple, but obviously they have wonderful attacking players, and one of their formerly wonderful attacking players now playing the N'Golo Kante role bizarrely with Griezmann. But you still have to do it. You saw Croatia last night labouring. They've got decent attacking players. France do their best to get the ball into an attacking area, a shooting area, and they shoot, which seems pretty simplistic to me.
Yeah, and they weren't at their best tonight, but you still felt like the chances were going to kind of fall to France, and I guess there's a number of reasons for that. But if you think back throughout the competition, so many of their goals are coming from wide areas and crosses into the box and headers. The goal against England was a header. There was a couple against Australia. I remember Mbappe had a header. Rabiot had a header. Even Giroud has picked up a couple of goals throughout the competition. They're so dangerous from wide areas that they get down the side of you, and they're not afraid. Like in kind of today's football, we see so much, indulgence when we get into the final third of passing for the sake of it. But actually, France are the complete opposite. Once they get into those areas, they're not afraid to just feed it into the final third and flood the box with bodies. So that's one way they can go about you. And then naturally enough, like the pace they have in the counter attack with Dembele and Mbappe, both of them are more than happy to come central and run beyond Giroud, and they can kind of just get at you, Mikey, in a number of different ways. So that's kind of their main threat in attack, is that they can sit in, counter attack you, but they can also keep control of the ball and carve you open with different ways, by linking off Giroud. So yeah, I mean, that is one thing that you would say with France in particular, is the spread of goals, the spread of creativity, options off the bench. They've scored quite fluidly throughout this competition, and you would certainly back them to at least get one against Argentina.
Yeah, you certainly would. And a lot of the reason for that, Peter, would be Antoine Griezmann, who's just, we've rhapsodized him on the podcast previously during this World Cup. He just kind of, the role he's playing now is just, it's wonderful to watch. He's cut his hair, which I'm also very happy about. But he's not like, he's not playing this kind of disaffected wide man of a front three thing that maybe we saw a bit that didn't work at Barcelona. He has kind of seemed to slot in somewhere along the lines of where N'Golo Kante might have been in this team. But one thing he still does that he's always done is he delivers a ferocious, whether it's a cross from open play or a set piece. His crossing is dangerous. I kind of think I could score. I kind of get the impression I could get on the end of an Antoine Griezmann cross and probably score a goal at the World Cup, because they're just delivered with such pace. And he did it numerous times, and it just caused consternation in the Moroccan defence.
Yeah, like he's obviously had to step up a little bit in this World Cup, even though he was obviously an important player. But as you said, with those few injuries that France had coming into the tournament, he's had to step up. And he looks incredibly comfortable when he's playing. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Argentina deal with them on Sunday as well, because he's been such a crucial player for them. But it's a scarily good French team, in my opinion. And I mean, if you look at the record that they have getting out of the group, considering what's happened in the last few World Cups with World Cup champions, is impressive. But to try, have a chance to do two back to back, I think you have to go back to like Brazil in the 60s, 62 for it to happen. So yeah, they're a very, very impressive unit, and I kind of dread the fact that we have to play them in March in Dublin. But
oh yeah,
that's just the way it goes.
Let's not get into that right now. That's too depressing.
On that, Mikey, like the Griezmann one is a really interesting just how he's being used by Deschamps. Like, he was top goal scorer in Euros, I think, in 2016. And then he picked up a number of goals in Russia, maybe 4. He's yet to score in this competition, but he's linking the play so well for that French team. I'm really intrigued to see how that pans out with himself and Rodrigo de Paul. Like, they both play for Atletico Madrid. I'm sure they both know each other inside out. That matchup is probably as important as the Mbappe one, because he's the one who's feeding that front three at the moment. You saw against England how influential he was, and you have to shut him down when it comes to Sunday.
Yeah, but then the other one, Paul, then going the other way is Leo Messi tends to pop. Well, he pops up anywhere, but as we saw, a devastating effect last night. The right wing is still his preferred area. Hernandez isn't going to get a lot of help from Kylian Mbappe. It'll work both ways. Obviously, the two PSG guys will stand on the halfway line having a chat with their hands on their hips, probably. But like, there was a piece, the Athletic had a piece during the week about how Mbappe at the age of 12 went to Chelsea, and he had a trial and he wasn't signed because even at the age of 12 he wasn't tracking back, he wasn't defending. And Chelsea suggested maybe he comes back in a year or two and maybe he shows us how he can defend. And Mbappe's mother pretty much told him to get bent and said he's going to play the way he plays and you'll want him for 50 million in a few years' time. She's probably not far wrong. But that's going to be both teams are going to have to set up and say, look, our two most dynamic players, whether they're 35 or 23, like, they're not going to do much defending. They're playing on the same side of the pitch. That's going to be interesting as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Argentina will absolutely look at that left-back position and Hernandez and identify that as their probably best route to goal. I think he really struggled against England at times, particularly going up against Saka. And tonight, even Ziyech and Hakimi were really troubling. Hakimi was actually running inside Ziyech at times and almost like an underlap and causing a 2v1 situation, which Hernandez couldn't get to grips with. But you're absolutely right. A lot of that is coming from the fact that Mbappe refuses to track back. So I would fully expect that Messi, in the way that he's playing, he just drifts, he finds spaces, he'll pull onto that side. And we saw last night what he did to Gavardio. He'll play on Hernandez. He's linked up with Molina quite well on that right-hand side as well. So that is going to be a big problem for France. I think, that's something that they probably need to look at, whether it's Tuchemi or Rabiot doubling up and getting across and giving Hernandez a bit of a dig out. They'll need to look at that area. But Argentina, I'm sure, won't worry too much, or they won't change too much, because they've played for Messi the whole competition. They're happy to let the others do the running for him, and the protection that Fernandez, Rodrigo de Paul in the middle of the park have given. And whether they go with a 4 or 5, I would suspect they probably go with a 5 at the back on Sunday night and just give, whether it's Molina, that extra body, whether it's Romero or Otamendi pulling across just to double up on Mbappe.
Mm-hmm. Mentioned a few times on the podcast that, France probably the best starting 11, Peter, but perhaps with all the injuries pre-tournament, don't have the same squad they had 4 years ago. They're kind of making a mockery of me at this stage, which I'm sure they'll delight at. That's their major win tonight. But the subs did not change the game. They were winning, but the subs kind of secured it for them. There's no doubt that Thuram coming in and going on the left and Mbappe going through the middle really caused Morocco problems. And then obviously Kolo Muani scored a goal within seconds of coming on the pitch. So that's definitely interesting, but this idea that France don't have kind of the bench is clearly wrong, because as he was coming off as the substitution was being made, George saying, well, we'll just confirm now in a second who is coming on here for France for Dembele. And I was like, it's Kingsley Coman. It's going to be Kingsley Coman. Of course it's Kingsley Coman. And then it's Kolo Muani. So they definitely they have more options than maybe we've been giving them credit for up to now.
Yeah, definitely. When Thuram came on, at one stage he kind of ran at the defense and he was taken down just as he got to the edge of the box, and it looked like he was going to get in and he was brought down. So yeah, obviously a pacey fellow who can come in and change the game. And then like the goal, obviously Muani kind of just had to finish it at the back post. There wasn't a huge amount, but I suppose he got in the right place at the right time to get there. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much they use the squad, or how much they have to use the squad on Sunday, because I suppose you'd expect something of a fairly physical game from Argentina. I don't know what you think, Paul, but in terms of like everything they've tried to get up in people's faces, even some of the footage from after the Dutch game, which I know was a fairly tense game anyway, with all the cards getting handed out and all the rest of it. But there's footage of them going up to the manager and Messi having words with the manager and all the rest of it. And it'll be interesting to see if there's well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and how much of that additional squad that they need on Sunday. But it'll be interesting to see if Argentina really stick it up to France. I'm not sure if other teams have in the tournament so far from kind of the games I've seen and get properly physical with them.
I don't think there's much choice, Paul, do they? Because the one thing France have that Argentina don't have in the backs that I've noticed really is like the French forwards, apart from sure they just have raw speed, don't they? And that's something that could surely hurt the Argentinians.
Yeah, it absolutely has potential to do that. I was really worried for Argentina after the Saudi game with Romero and Otamendi playing together. I thought there was mistakes between them. To be fair to them, over the course of the tournament, they've improved. I just think that they might look at going with those three centre halves. I think individually they all have mistakes in them, but I think when they play together, that Martinez, Romero, and Otamendi, I think it gives them just a bit more solidity, and I think they might look for that against France with that in mind and how threatening they are going forward. But for me, France can't afford to play like they did tonight or how they did against England, against Argentina. I think Argentina would do them if that was the case, but I would expect that they would up their game and maybe they'll freshen up with one or two bodies that missed out tonight. But yeah, interesting to see. I would suspect that Argentina would go 5 at the back, Mikey.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and obviously Rabiot coming back in for France would you could see that coming in, but then at the same you'd have to say in the defense, Peter Konate didn't do himself any harm tonight. He had an excellent game. He seemed to be kind of he seemed to be anticipating stuff maybe a little bit quicker than Varane, and they did seem like kind of quite a good team there in the centre of defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, France have looked decent defensively the whole way through the tournament, and I think in terms of like say the lapses, obviously the Saudi game was the first game and Argentina got over it reasonably quickly, but even in the Dutch game they conceded those couple of goals when the game was safe in the second half, or it should have been safe in the second half. And that's the area where I think like that level of concentration where I just think I just have that feeling that France will be able to kind of pick it apart if they need to, or well, when they need to, obviously, to kind of get the goals to win the game on Sunday. And I could kind of be more confident. Like, I know France lost their last group game, but they were through at that stage. So I kind of just get the sense of France being that bit more solid at the back and just being, I don't know, it's such a bland thing to say, but just being professional, really getting the job, doing what they have to do, and just looking at control of the games that I've seen them playing in throughout the tournament, as opposed to Argentina, who obviously can be brilliant going forward, but are just susceptible to leaking that odd goal where I think it's down to concentration a lot of the times, where it's kind of more basic errors than I think France have made at the back.
Where do you stand on that, Paul? This is obviously the first clean sheet they've kept at the World Cup. They've only conceded 1 goal per game up to now, but Pamecano kind of missed out through probably nothing too serious, but a knock, and Konate came in. They kept a clean sheet, so it could be one of those unfortunate stories for Pamecano. He plays all the way through, gets injured for the semi-final, and potentially loses his place for the final.
Yeah, he looked a little ropey against England. Harry Kane.
Mistake in him, like an Argentinian defender.
Yeah, absolutely. He seems overly eager at times to go try win the ball, and Harry Kane rolled him quite well in the first half, and he may have played himself out of the team. He's obviously picked up a knock, which is unfortunate. So it'll be interesting to see if he does come back in. I think the rest of the back four picks itself. They have done well to keep a clean sheet tonight. I thought there was times where if Morocco just had a bit more quality, a better team might have carved them open. I'm not convinced that France will keep a clean sheet, nor Argentina. I actually think it might be a score draw on Sunday. But yeah, I think there's frailties in both defenses. I'm not convinced on Hugo Lloris. I never have been, and I think individually, I think Koundé naturally not being a fullback, and Hernandez has shown at times that he is quite liable to make a mistake. So there's definitely ways of getting at both France and Argentina, and the midfielders of both teams are going to have a big job to kind of help them out in that regard.
Yeah. A word on Morocco then, Peter, because I think we probably all agree that they've kind of been the story of the World Cup, first World Cup in a Muslim country, and, a Muslim country from North Africa goes further than African countries ever gone before. And they were far from, like 2-0 is probably a fair reflection, but, as we said at the start, they had more than their fair share of it tonight. And as my 1990s analogy kind of showed, they kind of came out of their shell a little bit tonight, and it was probably, you could argue from a neutral point of view, the most entertaining game of theirs we've seen so far. And it does give hope to the rest of us that, a country, Morocco, who've, second round their best up until now, can get to a World Cup semi-final. It shows what a good coach and a talented core of players and a clear plan can do, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Any team that knocks Spain and Portugal out of a World Cup, even with the help of penalties or whatever, like that's an incredibly impressive performance. As you said, they're playing to their strengths. So I'm sure it'll begin discussions, maybe once we all take Christmas off, I'm sure it'll begin discussions about teams playing to their strengths and not trying to change the style that they play with and all the rest of it when it comes to our own team. But yeah, like it does give you that sense of a team, an outsider team doing well in a World Cup. And I suppose looking ahead to the future, the next World Cup and all the rest of it, that whole period where there's going to be more teams getting qualifying. There'll obviously be teams who probably end up getting well beaten in some games, but there'll also be fairly good teams that with a little bit of luck could go far in 2026. So yeah, like it was an interesting story, as you say, and they seem to have massive support. And, it's always the first time a team does something like that is always the most impressive. All the footage from Morocco that was coming through on the various news wires was fantastic to see, and all the rest of it. So yeah, they did give it hope, and it was just something a bit different. It was something that I don't think many were predicting before the tournament started. So yeah, they're owed great credit. But I mean, I think Didi Hamann said it at the end of the coverage there. You could have played for another 3 hours. He didn't fancy Morocco to score. So there was that element whereby there's only so far you can go with a team that are good, but not quite as good as France, I suppose.
Paul, that's true. Probably, Leinster Senior League level is true at League of Ireland level, and it's true, the level you played at in the UK. A team without a striker is kind of, there's a reason strikers go for the money they go for, and the reason like they always seem to be a bit of a rarity, a bit of a, there always seems to be a shortage of top quality strikers, and at international level, I think it's even more striking. Excuse the pun. With that, a lot of teams, they just don't have one, and it makes life very difficult. We saw it with Croatia. You can get so far, but as Peter says, it's very difficult to to go to win one of these tournaments if you haven't got someone who's scoring you 4 or 5 goals.
Absolutely, and I mean, look at the 2 games and the 2 semi-finals, Alvarez and Messi scoring for Argentina, and then tonight I know Theo Hernandez was involved in the first, but you just look at the roles that the strikers have played and what they managed to do for you is they kind of dig you out of difficult situations, or they produce a moment of magic, and it just gives you a lifeline always when you've got somebody the likes of a Kylian Mbappe, the top end of the pitch, who can stretch teams, who can carry the ball for you and can produce a moment of magic to score at difficult occasions. And that's been the case for both France and Argentina. And yes, when you look at, I guess, the 2 semi-finalists who have lost, Morocco and Croatia, there is that kind of gaping hole that they don't really have somebody with that bit of quality who can just get them over the line. And look at I guess the performance they had against Portugal, 1-0. Spain was on penalties. So if they were going to go beyond today, you kind of felt like 1 goal was the maximum they'd get out of France, and a clean sheet was necessary. And when you concede early and you don't have that kind of threat in the final third, it's always an uphill battle.
Yeah. Interested to get your view on it, Paul, because obviously this has been like one of the best kind of Cinderella stories of a 32-team World Cup, and we had our own moments in a 24-team World Cup, get to a quarter-final, which is a similar achievement in some ways, you could say. Even qualifying for a 24-team World Cup back in 1990 was pretty impressive. Obviously the next World Cup is going to a 48. It makes it more likely that a team like Ireland will qualify for the World Cup, but I think making it like group stages to get down to 32 teams and then a knockout, do you make it less likely that a team like Morocco could actually get as far? It's almost like the more rounds you put in, the less likely it is that you're going to kind of get these stories.
Yeah, probably. I think from our own point of view, it's 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 probably of benefit that they're extending the reach. We saw that when it came around to Euro 2016 and they increased the numbers. It just gives you that kind of extra leg or that extra chance to qualify for a major competition. I think if you're a country who naturally qualifies for these tournaments, you probably strongly disagree. But yeah, you would imagine so, because even Croatia last night, like, they rode their luck to get to the semi-finals. Morocco, to go on that journey that they did, had to ride their luck. And if you have to do that over the course of, 2 or 3 more games, the toll that it's taken on the players to concentrate and play like that and be so disciplined in their shape is far more consuming than it is for a possession-based team, which the top teams tend to be. So for a team to go 7, 8 games to get to a quarter or semi-final, you're probably saying it's less likely. Like, they also don't have the same kind of cohort of players or the same group of players to choose from, like a France or a Spain. So you could see tonight when they got to the semi-final, there's injured bodies, there's tired legs, and it's just too much of an ask. So in a long way of answering that question, Mikey, I would say it's probably more unlikely that would happen, but who knows? I mean, I certainly didn't suspect that they'd get beyond Spain, and they proved me wrong, got to a semi-final. So you'll always have surprises.
Yeah, and there's obviously as well they haven't quite decided whether they're going to have 12 groups of 4 or 16 groups of 3. And even when you're saying those numbers out loud, Paul, it just sounds ridiculous that there would be that many groups. And also the idea that they might revisit the 3-team group, which hasn't been around since 1982 because of skullduggery and teams knowing what they needed in the last game, one team not playing and the other 2 teams knowing what result would suit them, is being kind of consigned to the history books. But now FIFA are thinking, well, actually maybe we're going to need to do 12 groups of 4 to get down to 32 teams, that means there'll be over 100 games in a World Cup, which means we also risk going from a nice tight 4-week window to something akin to a cricket or rugby World Cup. And I think everybody kind of likes the time scale of the World Cup as it is, Paul, don't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to position that one with my missus, because that's another couple of days and another number of games that I'd have to get over. I think we should absolutely be welcoming this if we're thinking about our own qualification and getting to these tournaments. I was probably against extending out the Euros. I was probably against the Nations League and the introduction of that competition. And to be honest with you, I probably don't mind either of them. So, albeit that the 32 team works very well, if they are to change it and if it does increase our chances, I think it's something that us as Irish people should be welcoming.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. I don't know how many of those extra qualifying places are going to come to UEFA is the problem, but there maybe even 1 or 2 extra would increase our chances. Very important question for you, Peter, and I feel I need to ask it to you with that beautifully decorated Christmas tree behind you, because I think the football that they have for the semi-finals and finals, I think it would look quite good on your Christmas tree, but I'm not sure how good it looks on a football pitch. Where do you stand on gold footballs?
Is this the World Cup ball that they're using at the moment?
Yeah, for the semi-finals and finals, they've got this gold one. I'm not having it.
Yeah, it's festive. Next World Cup comes up in whatever it's going to be, June or July of 2026. So yeah, sure, it's something a bit different. I mean, I'm always harking back. I always get some way of fitting in 1998 into the World Cup podcast, but definitely the 98 football was clearly the best one. But yeah, like, it's just to return to that whole discussion about the 48 team World Cup. I mean, if it's 16 groups and there's 16, I think there's 16 European teams, because there's 13 at the moment. I think we get an extra 3 places for UEFA. I wonder, will they try and keep European teams completely apart, or how will the draw work? Like, there's a whole lot of that needs to be worked out in the next however long they have to work it out and decide and organize whatever way they're going to run it. Because if not, like you could have European teams completely separated, and that's, I don't know. FIFA is saying on the one hand they want the tournament to be encouraging of more countries from outside of Europe and South America to go far, but as you say, Mikey, if you have to play more European teams to get further in the tournament, there's far less likely of a chance of Morocco or whoever else getting there. So I know Arsene Wenger had quotes about it, but that's going to be something that has to be properly kind of discussed and sorted out. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing that comes up in the next few months, I feel.
Yeah, it's just as we kind of we've only 2 games, 1 real game left in the World Cup, and it just seems just a nice format that we have. I don't think they really need to mess with it. And the
question is then, Mikey, if we don't qualify, like watching a team of 48 without Ireland involved. Okay, if we get to qualify, brilliant. We're all delighted. But if we don't qualify, then we're watching probably a lesser product, if that you want to describe it as that, for a longer period of the summer.
Yeah,
I'll be watching the Leinster Football Championship.
I'm disgusted that you think I'd be that self-interested. I want to go back to the football for a second, Paul. The physical football, because I'm curious, because you played in a few leagues, you played obviously a few levels. What was your favorite match ball that you would play with week in, week out?
I didn't really enjoy the football league football, but when we used to go
is that a mitre
to FA Cup, yeah, it is a mitre. Yeah,
I never liked mitre footballs either.
Yeah, I didn't like them. They were certainly heavier. But when we used to go up to FA Cup, I remember playing away at the Etihad, and they were using their own. I think it was the Premier League football. It was a Nike ball, and just the connection off the foot. It seemed maybe it was just the surroundings and just enjoying yourself at the Etihad for the day. But it seemed to come off the foot nicer, and it was a nicer connection. Whereas the mitre ball in November, December felt like a GAA ball when you were kicking it.
Yeah, break your toe. God, I remember that. Yeah, you played in winter with a mitre ball, it would hurt. I'm just curious, because every World Cup I go on the Adidas website and I price up the World Cup ball and shake my head and say, no, maybe I should ask for one for Christmas. €130 football for my five-a-side. The lads would really appreciate it, at least. Okay, I think this is descending into something other than what it started out as, so we might leave it at that. We have our final, which is great. It's mentioned at the top, holders France against every neutral's anointed favourite team, seemingly, Messi United, Argentina. And don't forget the third, fourth playoff, where I imagine a slightly undermotivated Croatia will take on, I think, a Morocco team who will desperately want to win the bronze medal. So it might be more competitive than some of these third, fourth matches are. I don't know how competitive they are. I don't tend to watch them very often, I'll be honest. Paul, do you watch the third, fourth playoff?
No, I don't, but I will, because it'll be in Saturday Sport with Des.
They'll make me. They'll hold my eyelids open with matches. How about you, Peter? Do you watch the third, fourth playoff?
Used to watch it because Match used to do the not analysis, I suppose you could call it, whatever it was, that was in no way related to what was happening for the 90 minutes of the game. I suppose, yeah, maybe I'll watch it this year. Who knows? Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if Match are involved this year, but they used to be. That was always that is a shame. That was always a highlight.
Obviously, we're going to invite you all to watch it on Saturday afternoon at 3:00, and definitely watch the World Cup final at 3:00 on RTE2 and the RTE player. And I believe if you're out and about, you'll be able to listen to radio commentary on RTE Radio 1 on Sunday Sport. So that's good. And we'll have a preview and a review podcast too. So until then, say thank you to Peter, thank you to Paul, and we'll catch you again. Good luck.